You didn't get addicted to social media, you got addicted to a feeling. The feeling of being almost enough, of being one post away from mattering, of watching everyone else seem to have something you can't quite name, but you feel the absence of it constantly. You're lying in bed, you told yourself 5 more minutes, 40 minutes ago. You're not even enjoying what you're watching. You're not laughing. You're not inspired. You're just measuring, comparing. And somewhere between the highlight reels and the comment sections and the lives that look more put together than yours, you start to wonder if everyone else is living more fully than you are. That's not a social media problem. That's a much older wound that social media learned to press on. I'm in. This is Dose of Confidence. And today we're talking about social media addiction. The question we explore today is, why does something that makes us feel this small keep feeling so impossible to leave? Let's break this down. The word addicted gets used casually, but the architecture behind what you're experiencing isn't casual at all. Every notification, every like, every time someone responded to your story, your nervous system registered that as a small reward, just enough to make you want another one. That's intentional. Social media platforms are built around what psychologists call variable reward schedule. It's the same structure used in slot machines. You don't win every time you pull the lever, and that inconsistency is exactly what makes you pull it again. If every post got the same response, you'd stop caring quickly. But because the reward is unpredictable, sometimes 3 likes, sometimes 300, the uncertainty itself becomes the compulsion. And then there's the scroll. The scroll has no end. There is no last page, no moment where the app signals that you have seen everything and should probably go live your life. There is always more. The absence of a stopping point isn't an oversight, it's a design choice. So when you say you can't stop, you're not failing at self-control, you're encountering something that was engineered specifically to outlast it. That distinction matters because most people spend their energy blaming themselves for something that was built to be them. Here's the part that doesn't get talked about honestly enough. Social media does give you something real. There are people in your life you'd lose touch with entirely if there were no platforms keeping you loosely connected. There are communities of people who understand niche, specific parts of you that almost no one in your physical life shares. There are moments genuinely funny, genuinely moving, genuinely inspiring that pass through the feed and you actually enjoy. The problem isn't that it's all bad. The problem is that the ratio is off. You're consuming enormous amounts of content you didn't ask for, that doesn't serve you, that leaves a residue, just to get to the small pieces that do. And somewhere in that process, comparison becomes the water you're swimming in without noticing. We used to compare ourselves to the small group of people that we see on a daily basis. But now, social media expanded the comparison pool from that small group of people to an infinite feed of curated best moments. From people you went to school with, to random influencers and strangers. You're not comparing yourself to the average person. You're comparing yourself to the highlight reel of everyone simultaneously. And the brain doesn't know the difference between what's curated and what's real. It just registers that they have more. Their life looks fuller. What does that say about me? That's the misery underneath the misery. It's not really about the app. It's about what the app has become a mirror for. The parts of yourself you're not sure about. You probably asked yourself this already. Social media is bad for you. You know it's bad for you. So why don't you just stop? But the honest version of that question has a much more complicated answer. Because stopping means something. It means potentially missing things. Not in the FOMO sense, but genuinely. Events get announced there. Plans get made there. Communities exist there. For some people, their entire professional presence lives there. Leaving isn't just closing an app. For many people, it's opting out of the way the world is currently organized. And then there is the deeper reason. Do we actually want to stop? If we're being honest, no, not entirely, because what you want is the version of it that doesn't make you feel bad. You want the connection without the comparison, the updates without feeling like the algorithm is deciding your worth based on engagement. You want to feel like you're part of something without feeling like you're losing a competition you never agreed to enter. The desire isn't to disappear from social media. The desire is to feel like yourself inside it. And that's a much harder problem because social media platforms aren't designed for that. They are designed for engagement. Your peace is not a metric they are trying to optimize. So when you can't stop, it's partly the dopamine, partly the infrastructure, and partly the very real things that live there that you're not ready to lose. That's not weakness, that's a genuinely complicated situation. Some people do stop entirely, and they often describe it the way people describe leaving a loud room they had been in for so long they forgot what quiet felt like. But for most people, fully quitting creates a different kind of tension, the social cost, the professional cost, the slow drift from people and conversations that actually mattered. And what tends to happen is a relapse, not because the person is weak, but because they tried to cut off something that their life was genuinely organized around. The more honest version of stopping isn't a dramatic exit. It's a restructured relationship. The difference between reactive use and intentional use is the difference between eating when you're anxious and eating when you're hungry. The behavior looks the same from the outside. The internal logic is completely different. Reactive use is something inside you feels restless, uncomfortable, slightly unmoored. And before you have even finished identifying what the feeling is, you're already in the app. Intentional use is you decide when, for how long, and for what purpose. You come in with a reason. You leave when the reason is met. Most people have never actually tried the second one. They have tried willpower, which is a completely different thing. Willpower is white-knuckling it against a craving. Structure is removing the conditions that create the craving in the first place. You can't out-willpower an app that has thousands of engineers working to keep you inside it. But you can make it harder to access reflexively. You can interrupt the loop before it starts. And sometimes, that small amount of friction makes the entire difference. Control doesn't look like a dramatic detox. It looks like small changes to when you access it and what state you're in when you do. Looking out after every session sounds insignificant, but it adds a moment of friction, a pause between impulse and action, where something like awareness can exist. That pause is where the choice lives. Deleting the app from your phone and using social media only on a computer changes your relationship with it completely. The desktop version is slower, less intimate, less designed for compulsive checking. The inconvenience is the point. Notification silence is less about discipline and more about who's setting the agenda. When your phone alerts you, the platform decides when you engage. When you remove that, you decide. That's a small but real shift in who controls your attention. And then there is the ritual itself. The urge to scroll is almost never about the content. It's usually boredom or low-grade anxiety or the discomfort of being alone with a quiet moment. Noticing which one is it before you open the app doesn't require therapy or a 15-step plan. It just requires a second of honesty. Am I bored? Anxious? Lonely? Avoiding something? Name it. Then decide whether the app actually addresses that or whether it just delays it. Because it almost always delays it. The discomfort you were trying to escape is still there when you close the app. And sometimes recognizing that clearly without judgment is the beginning of actually doing something about it. Here's the thing that sits underneath all of that. Social media is a funhouse mirror of something deeply human. You want to be seen. You want to feel like you belong. You want to know that your life, your particular, specific, imperfect life, has some kind of value. Those aren't shallow desires. Those are some of the most fundamental things a person can want. Social media didn't create those needs. It just built an infrastructure around them and made them very, very profitable. And in the process, it gave you a distorted reflection, a version of connection that's technically there, but structurally hollow. A version of belonging that depends on performance, a version of being seen that only counts if the numbers confirm it. That's not what you're looking for. That's a substitute that got installed in place of the real thing. So when you feel like social media is making your life smaller, you're not wrong. It is. But the size of your life isn't determined by the feed. The feed just convinced you to measure it that way. I want to end with a question, because I think you already know more than you're giving yourself credit for. You know it's affecting you, you can feel it. The way a session can leave you more unsettled than before you started. The way your energy is different after 20 minutes of comparing yourself to everyone's best moments. You already know this. The question isn't whether social media is good or bad. The question is, what would your relationship with yourself look like if you stopped outsourcing the measurement of your life to a platform? What would feel like enough if you were the one deciding? You don't have to quit. You don't have to do anything dramatic. You just have to start noticing, honestly, without self-criticism, what you're actually looking for when you open it. Because most of the time, it's not a post. It's a feeling. And feelings can be found in more places than a feed. If this video helped you, feel free to subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. And let me know what other topics you'd like to hear about next. You can find more related videos in the description if you want to continue exploring. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.